Hiya and welcome back to the channel. It's always good to see people here, and today I'm going to be looking at Scotland's earliest known and intact settlement, Skara Brae, located on the Bay of Skara and the largest island in the Orkney archipelago of Scotland. We know that the site itself was occupied 3180 BC to about 2500 BC and is Europe's most complete Neolithic village. Skara Brae gained its World Heritage Site status as one of 4 sites making up the heart of Neolithic Orkney. It's older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Giza. People have actually called it the Scottish Pompeii just because of how well it's been preserved over time. The village itself consists of 10 clustered houses made of flagstones and earthen dams that provided support for the walls. The houses also include stone hearths, beds, cupboards. They also have a primitive sewer system and a primitive form of toilets and drains in each house, including water used to flush waste into a drain and out into the ocean. Pretty amazing really for the time, but at least that they understood that you needed to move the waste away from their living quarters, unlike, the cholera outbreak of Victorian London. In the winter of 1850 though, this is where it all really begins for us. We had a quite severe storm hit Scotland and it caused widespread damage, over 200 deaths. But in the Bay of Skara itself, the storm ripped up the earth from a really large irregular knoll known as Skara Brae already. When the storm cleared, the villagers found an outline of a village that wasn't theirs, consisting of several small houses without roofs. William Watt of Skara, the local laird, began an amateur excavation of the site himself, but after 4 houses were uncovered, work was just abandoned, although during my research for this video I couldn't really find why or what happened. He just sort of stopped. The site really remained undisturbed until 1913. And then during a single weekend, the site was plundered by a party with shovels who they stole an unknown amount of artifacts from the site. More than we can possibly know, because at the time the site wasn't guarded, wasn't looked after, nothing had been documented properly. And then in 1924, Scotland had another large storm that swept away part of one of the houses. They finally decided that at this point the site should be properly secured and investigated. This job was then given to University of Edinburgh's Professor V. Gordon Child, who then travelled to Skara Brae for the first time in mid-1927. So who were the people of Skara Brae? The people of Skara Brae were makers and users of grooved ware. It's a really distinctive type of pottery. Sometimes makers of this style are literally called the grooved ware people. Grooved ware wasn't an import from the European continent or anything like that. It does seem to have developed in Orkney early in the 3rd millennium BC, and soon it ended up being adopted in the rest of northern Scotland, Britain and Ireland. Their houses used earth sheltering built sunk into the ground into mounds of prehistoric domestic waste known as middens, kind of like little hobbit houses or the hill in Teletubbies, but they didn't have any nunu. But this also provided the houses with a stability and also acted as insulation against Orkney's harsh winter climate. On average, each house measures about 40 square metres or 430 square foot, with a large square room containing a stone hearth used for heating and cooking. Given the number of the homes that we found, it's likely that no more than 50 people lived in Skara Brae at any given time. At the time when Child was researching the settlement, he believes that they may have used peat to burn in their hearth, but the studies done show that peat wasn't actually available in the area and region until after the settlement was deserted. So it's full other fuels including driftwood and animal dung were used instead. There is evidence as well that dried seaweed might have been used, since we found other sites in Orkney where a glassy slag-like material called cramp has been found, which we think might be like residual burnt seaweed left behind. The dwellings themselves contain a number of stone-built pieces of furniture, including cupboards, dressers, seats and storage boxes. Each dwelling was entered through a low doorway that had a stone slab door, which could be shut by a bar that slid in bar holes cut in the door jambs. A number of dwellings offered a small connected antechamber as well, offering access to a partially covered stone drain leading away from the village. It's this part that people think may have been used as like indoor toilet chambers. 7 of the houses have similar furniture, with the beds and dresser in the same places in each house. The dresser stands against the wall opposite the door and was the first thing seen by anyone entering the dwelling. Each of these houses had the larger bed on the right side of the doorway and the smaller on the left. Archaeologist Lloyd Lang suggested that this housing pattern is found common in other Hebrides settlements up to the early 20th century, suggesting the husband's bed was the larger of the two, while the wife's was the smaller one. Discovery of beads and paint pots in some of the smaller beds may support this interpretation, as well as additional support coming from the recognition that the stone boxes lie to the left of most doorways, forcing the person as you go into the house to turn to the right hand male side of the dwelling. At the front of each bed lie the stumps of stone pillars that also support a canopy of fir, which is another link to the Hebridean style of housing. House number 8 has no storage boxes or dresser. It's just been divided into something like small cubicles. Fragments of stone, bone and antler were excavated here, suggesting the house may have been used to make tools like bone needles or flint axes. The presence of heat-damaged volcanic rocks and what appears to be a flue also support this. House 8 is very distinctive in other ways as well. It is like a standalone structure, not surrounded by a midden. Instead, it's actually above ground with walls over 2 meters thick and has a porch protecting the entrance. The people who actually built Skara Brae were mostly pastoralists who raised cattle and sheep. Child originally believed that the inhabitants didn't farm, but we then had excavation much later in 1972 where we found seed grains from a midden. So we know that things like barley was grown to help feed everyone in the settlement. Fish bones and shells were really common as well that we found in the middens, so we know that the dwellers ate seafood. We've also found limpet shells, which we believe may have been used as like fish bait and was kept in stone boxes in the homes themselves. These boxes were formed from thin slabs with joints made and sealed with clay to make them completely waterproof. Not sure if that makes them smell proof, but who knows. This pastoral lifestyle is quite different to some of the more out there theories about the culture of the Skara Brae people. One person called Ewan Mackey actually believes that Skara Brae might be the home of like a really privileged theocratic class of wise men who engage in astronomical and magical ceremonies at nearby like sites called, for example, we've got the ring of Brodgar and they got the standing stones of Stennis as well, but there's no archaeological evidence to prove that these holy, wise, mystical men lived here, although there is what we call like a Neolithic low road that goes from Skara Brae, passes near both of these sides and ends up at a chambered tomb called Maze Howe. Generally, low roads connect Neolithic ceremonial sites throughout Britain, so it's not really that surprising, but it is there. We believe the site was originally further from the sea than it is today, and that Skara Brae was built close to a freshwater lagoon protected by sand dunes. Although the visible buildings make us believe the village is complete, bar the house that we know for certain just sort of disappeared in that storm, it's pretty clear from what's sort of been left behind that there's been a lot of land and structures actually lost to sea erosion before the site's discovery and then protection by a seawall. They're also working on another excavation at the moment at the links of Noltland on Westray that appears to have a lot of similarities to Skara Brae. They may have been a similar connected village, but that's still undergoing. We know at some point that the village did end up becoming abandoned. The people left for one reason or another. Some people believe it was because they had a fate similar to Pompeii, but instead of a volcano, it ended up being a very large storm, and everything that comes with that sort of event, living near a coastal area, so they had to flee and get away to somewhere safer or higher ground. Other theories suggest that it had a very gradual burial and had actually already been abandoned by the point of its decline. Skara Brae has now been classed during a 2019 assessment as being extremely vulnerable to climate change due to rising sea levels, increased rainfall and other factors. They also highlighted the risk that if we were to have another really large severe storm, Skara Brae might be partially destroyed due to its age and condition. You can actually go visit the site though. They did close partially during the pandemic, but they are back open again, so if you ever find yourself scuttling about Orkney, it's not a bad shout to go over and have a look for yourself. There's also a video by Historic Environment Scotland that I'm going to be including in the description. They show you scans they've made of the houses and the insides. They partnered up with a university to get this done, to bring it to people worldwide. So if you can't get there in person, you'll still be able to see the insides and all the furniture. It is really lovely to look at, just how well preserved everything it actually is in these houses. They're much better than what you would expect for the age of the actual settlement. I really do love this village though. It really fulfills my need for that semi-underground house. So, I'm really glad I could cover it for the channel as well. It was really nice to be able to look at and research all these bits. Thank you for watching the video though. Please don't forget to share, like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.